Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a really specific and, well, powerful idea from your sources today, exploring this sharp distinction that's presented between what's called the natural man and the spirit-filled life.
Right. And according to this material, understanding this difference isn't just, interesting theology. It's actually presented as absolutely fundamental, key to understanding spiritual reality itself in this view.
Okay.
So we're going to look at the characteristics, the source of the divide as presented, and why this distinction, according to the text, makes all the difference.
So think of this deep dive as really pulling the core argument straight from the pages you shared with us. The source paints this picture, kind of vivid actually, of someone who might be outwardly religious, maybe sitting right there in the pew, but is described as fundamentally lacking something, well, crucial. What does that actually look like according to this text? And maybe more importantly, what does it say is the absolute non-negotiable requirement for change? Let's dive in.
Okay. So the source starts by defining this natural man. And it's someone who, yes, might participate in religious life.
Right, the outward stuff.
Exactly. Attending worship, maybe quoting scripture, even serving in some capacity. But the key point here, according to the material, is that this person is still governed by their natural instincts, their flesh, not by a new spiritual life. They haven't been born anew, as the text puts it.
In this internal state, it leads to a core inability, doesn't it? The source really highlights this. I think it mentions 1 Corinthians.
Yes, 1 Corinthians 2.14. It says, "The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him."
Foolishness, okay.
Exactly. And the insight there, as the source interprets it, isn't just that they disagree with spiritual truth, it's that they actually can't even perceive it correctly.
Ah, okay. So it's a perception issue.
It's presented that way, yes.
Yeah.
Things the source considers really central to spiritual life, like deep conviction, surrender, holiness, the whole concept of the cross. These things seem, well, irrational, maybe too extreme, or just too costly.
Too much effort, maybe.
Or too demanding, yeah. The analogy used is like having a lamp that looks fine, looks like a lamp, but there's actually no oil inside to produce light. They might like the idea of Jesus, perhaps, or the idea of truth, but the text is clear. They won't yield to his actual rule.
Okay, so if that inner lamp is, well, empty, what are the outward signs the source points to? You mentioned instability earlier.
It does, yeah. The material connects this state directly to that description in James 1.8 about a double-minded man being unstable in all his ways.
And that's not just like having a bad day.
No. The source argues this instability runs deep through everything. It describes someone wanting the comfort of belief, maybe, but still clinging tightly to the world.
Wanting it both ways.
Pretty much. Wanting salvation, but being unwilling fundamentally to let go of sin. It's like wanting opposites, comfort and conviction, the cross and the crowd, This basic inner conflict, the source says, makes genuine stability just impossible.
Which really sounds like what you might call a religion that has the outward form, the rituals, but lacks any real inner power.
That's a key phrase for the source. It actually references 2 Timothy 3.5, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof.
Oh?
So church attendance becomes just ritual. Faith is a mere statement, a profession, without being a real possession. Bible knowledge is just information, maybe, not transformation.
And how does that person react to, say, correction?
Well, the source argues that when correction comes, it often feels like a personal attack, because there isn't that new, pliable nature being formed inside by the Spirit. Without that internal power, that dynamic, real growth, according to this text, simply cannot happen.
Wow. And the material draws a really sharp line based on this, doesn't it? Almost a stark dividing line.
It couldn't be much clearer. Honestly, the text quotes Romans 8.9 directly. If any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he's none of his.
None of his. That's blunt.
It is. And the source really stresses there's no middle ground presented here. You're either walking by the Spirit or walking by the flesh. That's the dichotomy. And those external things, ceremonies, your cultural background, even really sincere commitment to religious practices, they're presented as unable to bridge that fundamental gap.
So even sincerity, just being really genuine in your efforts, that isn't enough on its own.
According to this source, that's correct. Sincerity is acknowledged, sure, but the text argues pretty strongly it's not a substitute for the new birth, for actually having the Spirit.
Right.
Without that inner transformation, truth just remains inconvenient somehow. Holiness seems optional, not essential. Even grace can be misunderstood or misapplied. The source warns against relying only on external actions like saying a specific prayer or walking an aisle or joining a church if that foundational new birth hasn't happened. Without it, the person is described as still being in Adam, still in their natural, unchanged state.
Which brings us right back around to what the source presents as the only source of real stability, real spiritual life.
And that's the presence of the Spirit, unequivocally. The source argues that only the Spirit provides that internal anchor and gives you the spiritual senses, the eyes, the ears, the heart to actually follow, to connect with God.
So without the Spirit, the religion is just
that empty lamp we talked about. It might look the part, but there's no light. With the Spirit, though, the source says, the soul is truly alive and connected.
And the source suggests you can't really hide that state forever, that it eventually shows.
No, it argues the fruit, or lack thereof, will eventually become apparent. The instability, the compromises, that inability to really grasp spiritual things, it surfaces.
But the material doesn't just leave it there on a diagnostic note. It includes a call, doesn't it? A call to action.
Absolutely. Very important point. The source emphasizes that God, in his mercy, calls even this natural man to turn away, to turn from self, from the world, to effectively die to that old nature and receive this new life, to walk in regeneration, being spiritually made new. And it culminates in that powerful, direct statement attributed to Jesus, "Ye must be born again."
You must be born again.
What's really fascinating here is how the source insists so strongly that the real test isn't the outward religious behavior, not primarily, but rather this fundamental internal spiritual reality, the actual presence of the Spirit.
It definitely shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from just checking off religious boxes towards something described as a complete inner transformation. And it offers a very clear explanation, within this specific framework at least, for why someone might seem religious but lack real change, or that stability we discussed.
Yeah. And if we sort of connect this to the bigger picture presented, the source really challenges us to look beyond just the surface appearances, to consider what the text presents as the essential underlying spiritual state of a person.
So thinking about these ideas, the ones presented in these sources, what does this all mean for you, the listener? The material really leaves us with that potent command, that statement, "Ye must be born again."
Right. And I think the question this source prompts us, maybe leaves us to ponder, is this: if that's the absolute necessity, what does this text fully imply that new birth actually entails? And how does it describe the path, the way from the state of the natural man to that completely new reality? It definitely gives you something significant to consider as you process this material.